Welcome to another episode of Selling What's Possible, a podcast dedicated to strategic account management. And joining me today is Brian Shea, who is a principal at Lucrum Partners. He is an advisor and coach to CEOs and revenue leadership teams, and an author, and brings a wealth of experience to the table in terms of working with so many different companies over a really long-term span of time to helping to drive performance. And so, Brian, welcome to Selling What's Possible. We're glad to have you here, and I'd love to hear a little bit about, your background on what makes you passionate about what you do and what your firm does.
Dave, well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and your team is doing terrific work at helping organizations sort of see customers differently. So congratulations on all the success. So what we do at Lucrum Partners is it probably sounds pretty simple. We help executive teams identify what are the gears that are causing sort of the revenue slowdown. And it's like, okay, so what does all that mean? Well, what we found is we've got a hypothesis this year. And maybe I'll throw this out, and you can pressure test it. I think this is the perfect year for Davies to take on Goliaths and win. And our perspective is there has been such a transformation in the marketplace, right? This big, massive shift to, buyer-driven motions, buyer-centric motions, buyer everything, is large organizations have a really big ship they've got to turn to change their mindset, their operating systems, their practices, their processes, their playbooks, and the like. And so nimble and fast-growing organizations, in our opinion, if we get this right with the right people and the right operating system, that there can be really aggressive sort of encroachment plays that can be run on larger competitors. And this only happens sort of once in a lifetime, where you have sort of an industry that gets flipped upside down. And I think as your firm and my firm sees, we got flipped. We got flipped in the last few years.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you say that. Well, everything's accelerated, it seems. And so they have a lot of different challenges and problems to address that are, post-COVID than pre-COVID. And just the acceleration of AI and how fast the world moves, to keep up as a selling organization with the buyer is really, I think, what you're getting at, which is critical, because the buyers are trying to solve problems, and if they don't get help, quickly and easily, they're tuning out. And I think the old playbooks, therefore, don't work anymore. And you're seeing that in the stats. We talked about some of these stats, but how buyers perceive sellers. It's been not great for a long period of time, but
Right.
but you have some statistics and points of view on working with salespeople, understanding where the value comes from. Share some of those insights with us that you've run across.
Yeah, Dave. One of the stats that it should be troubling for all executive leadership teams is a confidence gap, and there's these confidence gaps that happen at different tiers in the organization today. One, SBI growth, right? Folks out of Texas published this about a year and a half ago. And they talked about the confidence gap between the CEO and the executive leadership team. That gap in the CEO's belief that their executive leadership team can drive a growth strategy. It's almost 2/3 of CEOs that don't feel confident in their team. So pause, right? Start there. What causes that? What's driving that internally?
Yeah.
Right, for executive leaders. You come down below that, and Gartner put out that 83% of sales leaders are not confident that their sellers can engage with modern buyers. Like, okay, well, there's another confidence gap. And then you talk to sellers, and you're like, okay, so how's it working on your side? And when we say sellers, we account managers and frontline sellers. Yep. And sellers are saying, look, at least they said this to Gartner, almost 3/4 of them are just overwhelmed by this deluge of skills that they have to know. They're like, you guys just keep piling on. And meanwhile, the execution stats continue to fall, right? The close rates are down year over year and the such. So we have all these confidence gaps all the way through a commercial organization. And so our perspective is, well, stop for a second. right? The problem may not be in your sales force. It may not be in your playbook. I mean, let's start with the go-to-market strategy that the executive team is A, that they've agreed to, and B, where that sort of first gap begins to show itself. And let's dig in there, because this is, again, as you know, we were just talking about, is any signals that we're using plays from only a few years ago, right? That we're creating sort of motions that are built off of understanding of things that happened 36 months ago, 48 months ago, is one of our first sort of stepping points off the cliff. Like, we're going in the wrong direction. So yeah, I think all the data that's out there, we can put all the data up on, like, the signals are telling us as an organ, as a community of coaches and leaders, that we're not getting this right.
Yeah.
It's not like it's off by a little bit. It's way off.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, so why? What is the driver or set of drivers that are feeding each of these? But this confidence gap, to me, is one of those signals that I think is understated. I think it's understated because there's this trust erosion that's already happening inside of organizations before they get on the field to engage with
So
new.
it's worse than even the stats show, is what you mean. So there's a misalignment between how the sellers are, and that includes account sellers, strategic
That's right.
account sellers, and account managers, and sort of the buyers. Um, what the buyers are after, the needs that they have, this shift that's happened, right? This flip that you talked
Mm-hmm.
about, and this is that sort of mindset shift concept of, so much of the previous behavior, the playbooks, are inside out plays, right? Product mindset, things are aligned by product lines, the way that dollars roll up and are being, performance is monitored by corporations, is very self-centered, product oriented versus about the customer.
Right.
So you're really talking about retraining, well, reorienting, I guess is a better word, like the mindset of both the organizational leadership, but also all of the downstream account teams and sellers as well, to be much more customer centric. Ultimately, that's really what's at the heart of it, right?
We believe so. And we often talk to our accounts about upskilling, not reskilling.
Okay.
Right. And this upskilling thing is the layering on, right? Let's go get another training program. Let's go get another coaching thing. Let's go get another piece of sales tech. And then we say, stop. Let's go back and unwind and gain an understanding of the way that your buyers are buying today, right? How do they engage with you and your competitors to sort of solve for these problems? And let's wind it back from how they're operating and what are the skills that we need to now step into this conversation. And so here's an example. So our friends of mine over at Corporate Visions, you're familiar with Corporate
Sure.
Visions,
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
do terrific work on the neuroscience that's driving modern decision making of executive buying teams. And executive buying teams, right? You and I both know an executive, right? A C-level, right? They're being driven by the stats, the performance that the board cares about, that the street cares about, right? The big sort of enterprise level metrics, right? That may be an
Right.
EBITDA number, that may be a revenue, right? We know this. But yet, how many of our sellers are going out and having a functional conversation like, our widget saves 8% of downtime, or our thing can get you to run 2% faster? Those product level metrics don't matter to executive buyers. What executive buyers are saying is, show me how your solution helps me achieve this thing. And that
Right.
thing is a different set of numbers, metrics, and outcomes than most sellers are used to selling against, right? So there's this, how do we elevate the acumen of our account teams and our frontline sellers to understand that the conversation is just different. It's not about the thing you're trying to sell. It's about their problem that you have to show that you understand it, and you can have an ability of maybe helping them solve it.
Well, I think you're bringing up a great point. Some of the misalignment. First of all, there's more executive buyers at the table now than there used to be. It
Yeah.
seems like
What's this week's number?
I know it's like last week I think it was 10 or 12, and then it's 20. And if you look at all the people involved in making a decision, right, they all have specific sort of outcomes or impacts that they want. I guess what you're really saying is at the heart of that no decision, as things take longer than you think that they should or seem natural, or you know and timelines are so long in a lot of
Right.
these sort of big buying decisions. How do you monitor and track whether you're on target or not, and the frequency of dialogue with the buyers and the multiple buyers seems like it's a key component, but there's got to be a lot of back and forth and validation and rechecking. What's your sort of perspective on how to overcome the no decision,
Well,
conundrum?
yeah. So this is why I think sales and account organizations should be using technologies like yours at Polaris. Um, Sorry, you didn't ask me for that plug, but so what we're missing, right, is having a clear understanding of the entire executive landscape that surrounds a metric. And so there's two parts of it. Number one is, what are the metrics that the organization has put a stake in the ground for this year, publicly stated, whatever. And who are the executives that are accountable for executing against those metrics? And what's that ecosystem that surrounds those executives that are responsible for hitting that metric? And so the first mindset is we have to start top down, right? We have to have an understanding of where is this either current account of ours or perhaps a new account, or it's an account that we're trying to expand in. Like where will their executives be focused this year? And do I have a value equation, a value statement, a value equation, some disposition that I can be relevant to them and helping them solve their problems, right? It's an entire 180-degree mind shift versus, okay, so Dave's now the executive buyer. Hey, Dave, we've got this new thing that'll reduce cycle time, blah, 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 blah. And Dave's like, why is this person in my office, right? Why did I
Right.
take this call? So this need to have, from a sales or an account management organization, right, real clarity on what are the Daves of the world doing each day? What's a day in the life of Dave? And can we be relevant to helping Dave solve his problems?
I love that you brought up relevancy, because I think that I call it the relevancy gap.
Hmm.
Relevancy builds trust,
Right.
and trust builds repeat purchasing
Mm-hmm.
and reliance on a vendor to solve problems over and over again. And relevancy comes from knowledge, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to be knowledgeable about the account and the situation. I think you brought up a great point, which is it's not just I know what the company does and what the roles of these people are, but it's sort of the contextual fabric wrapped around the situation that the executives are in, current events that are happening, what they're trying to solve now in the next 6 months, in the next quarter, the next year. And then I think value equations are great. That's a tangible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got different flavors of it, but people understand, that there's different alignment mechanisms of impacts, right, to what the desired outcomes are of the buying group and the executive teams. And I think it's the continued relevancy too. I'm not just relevant on one week. I got to be relevant week to week, and I have to build that trust. It's sort of like a bank account of
Hmm.
relevancy builds trust, and it happens over time, and it works because you see good teams really nail it when they are very aligned. And that's what brings me to the account. I wanted to bring up the account leader
Yeah.
role itself, and let's just talk about that, because you talked about reskilling, upskilling, what makes a good account leader, how account leaders should think about this 180-degree shift in mindset, how they got to sort of remind themselves every day, I got to be an expert on the customer and I got to help my team be an expert on the customer. What's your sort of point of view on, how they go about doing that, or what makes the best and brightest, achieve great results quickly versus others that struggle to do it?
So let's go back to our Davy versus Goliath for a moment. And let's put our Davy hat on for a moment. So as an executive leadership team of a smaller, more nimble, more agile organization, imagine the ability of hiring this tip of the spear, right? This account leader who has industry an industry and domain understanding, right? A really fluent understanding of the customer's business. Imagine this account leader is also built with really, well, two pieces. Number one, financial acumen, right? Be able to speak the language of finance, investment to impact. And then they also have this executive presence about them, right? They're trusted and they're relevant and they act and sound like they belong in the room with executives. Imagine having that type of tip of the spear account leader that can be asked when the stuff hits the fan. Hey, how do you think about this? Or do you have a perspective on this? Or what else are you seeing in the market? Right? That is really a golden seat to sort of holding your position at the table. Now, notice what I didn't talk about was product knowledge,
Right.
delivery knowledge, right? So if we think about the elevate part of this for a moment, if we could put frontline account managers on our key accounts that are elevated in both their skill, their competency, and what we ask them to do, and they can hang at that level within an account, all the other stuff, deliveries, solutioning, finance vehicles, whatever it is, you can find other people in your organization to bring on stage and help you. But your lead singer of this band just operates at a different altitude. Now, let's flip it and talk about a Goliath. Okay, so we have a strategic account manager who started with the organization 6 years ago as a seller, then moved into account management because they like farming more than they did hunting. And then as a farmer, right, they had one account and then they got two accounts and they did reasonably well and they got promoted, okay? Those account managers are operating in many times from here's what I did to become successful in my role. What's sort of moved under their feet is yes, but the people that you used to engage with no longer have any authority. They'll take a meeting with you. They may be able to provide some insights, right? But they don't have any authority to help you move forward and drive revenue with the account. And until we understand that, well, somebody else is at the table.
Yeah.
So in thinking about the design with the two, that's why I really love this whole day. I think this is the year for the Davies to be able to really effectively execute growth against Goliaths. They can build it faster. They can drive for a different skill level. They can drive for a different acumen. And I think they can drive for a different conversation inside of accounts that help executive buyers sort of breathe and cut through all this chaos that they're struggling with every day. I mean, regulatory, new administration, right? Tariffs, right? You think about supply chain issues, AI, cybersecurity, right? All of the stuff that is rattling around in front of executive leaders all day long. And yet some organizations show up with hey, Dave, I want to show you my new product widget.
Yeah, no, I think you're bringing it's a great point because what you're saying is the executive buyers don't care about the product. They care about dealing with navigating this very complex world, overcoming a lot of these different challenges, and they want advisory, consultative type of people around them to help guide their decision making and how that they successfully overcome these problems that they have. And that can be a David size company
Hmm.
or account team that
Or an account team.
comes in and is extremely consultative in the moment. And I think that's uh, really valuable insight. I was going to ask you, in our world today, there's so much data and so much AI and all of this. I want to bring up the topic of a number two
Hmm.
to the account leader. So there's an account leader, right? And they're expected to know everything and do everything and be this sort of superhero that can pull all that off. And if you're not right there adapting what you're talking about to that situation, you miss out on an opportunity, but you're also not being relevant to what the buyer's going through. So just give me your thoughts on that.
So I think that is an absolute brilliant strategy. And so when we think about what a Davy could build and execute tomorrow, right? They could build this account leader role fairly quickly and stand that up. And imagine having, we'll get this Batman and Robin analogy here, I
Yeah.
think, right? But
Yeah.
having this business analysis partner, imagine showing up at an account that way, right? And walking into an executive conversation that says, look, you know me, but here's my business strategist, and here I want to share, or we want to share sort of a different perspective of the way that we're looking at your business, your industry. And you've got a business strategist that can bring sort of a whole new level of analysis and data structure as this Batman and Robin with being the face of your organization. As a Davy, you could absolutely run circles around the Goliath that's still showing up with a underskilled,
Yeah.
right, overtaxed account manager. I think that is absolutely, um, I think that's a brilliant sort of plus one to put into an organizational design, right? We thought RevOps was going to do that years ago. No, we're not. That's not the kind of caliber,
Yeah.
right? We're looking for a senior data financial analyst that can take sort of this complex stuff and help make it sort of actionable, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It's somebody that's monitoring what's going on at the customer and becomes a conduit, because I think the role of an account manager is so vast and
mm-hmm,
so broad, and and their own responsibilities to drive revenue for their organization and report it out and lead the team and make sure that the trains are running on time and all those things. It's overwhelming to, on top of that, layer on the research, the insights, the knowledge gathering. And it's not just about the business, right? It's about all the roles of the buyers in the business and what's happening in the moment. But we've seen some great results when relevancy goes up.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you can measure it in a tangible way, but boy, the customers react in an extremely positive manner very, very quickly, because they're not used to it. They're not used to somebody coming in and being relevant and providing real guidance and information that they need to navigate what they're going through. And so when you do it, we see, a very, very positive reaction from the executive buyers. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing anecdotally.
Yeah, it actually scratches the itch of what the research is saying, right? We're executive buyers, this
Yeah.
chaos gap that they're struggling to manage every day. This comes in right at that level, right? It comes right in at the chaos and helps create a little more clarity around what's driving the chaos, right? Or a different perspective on how to manage that chaos.
Yeah.
Or here's an insight of the way one of your competitors maneuvered around this chaos, right? Those are the things that executive leaders, uh, when presented properly, they're like, okay, where have you been my entire life? How come my own
Right.
staff doesn't tell me this stuff, right? You become highly relevant because your conversation track is getting them to say, wait, tell me that again, tell me more. Hey, let's go up the hall. I want you to share this with others, right?
Exactly.
That's when you've become highly relevant, in my opinion, with executive leadership
Well,
teams.
and I love this dialogue. I think, let's talk about a couple of the tangible
Mhm.
outputs that Batman and Robin team could put together, right? So you could have a priority map of, we see the top 10 issues you're dealing with are these, and these seems to be fast moving. That could be a real tangible output that the client would engage with in validating, talking about, collaborating with the team on.
So I want to come back and finish just one thing, because I think you and I are about to go off and build a Batman and Robin program. It feels like. So remember, in our back pocket, the statistic that we talked about earlier in our session is there's a big confidence gap between CEOs and the executive leadership team. Imagine, right? You understand that, and you have the ability of sitting up there at the executive leadership team between them and the CEO, and bringing these insights and really being able to bring your executive partners along, whether it's a chief commercial officer, whether it's the chief operating officer, right? Whether it's a chief financial officer, whoever it is, and be able to tell a sort of collaborative story in a larger group within ELT with the CEO present, right? Imagine a CEO goes, Dave, my chief operating officer, is smarter than I gave him credit for. He brought in this expert or this team of experts, and they're filling our plate with insights and perspectives that we haven't heard before. Dave, great job, right? So there's an opportunity to take advantage, probably not the right phrase, right? But to be cognizant of this confidence gap and be able to build your team and your motions to go help close that. That's good account work.
That's a great point. In fact, account leaders could be the very mechanism through which this mindset shift, this buyer centric orientation of their own executive teams occurs, because they could bring to their own internal executives, hey, these are things about this customer in this industry that's driving their buying decisions, and inform their own internal corporate executive team what that is. Because I think the customer IQ, and I read a stat once, it was something, this was from the Strategic Account Management Association, but I think one of the stats was that CEOs on average spend 3% of their time with customers. I mean, it was really low.
Right.
And so their distance from customer, I call it, is very large. So they don't know what they don't know. And so the largest account teams have the most insight on what those needs are, but to amass those insights and bring them back to the organization could change the culture a little bit, while they're asking for more resources, right, to align to customer problems. And, what I see is there's so many customer problems to solve. I call it the invisible pipeline, but there's this massive opportunity to solve problems that everybody's ignoring because they're not paying attention to what they are.
Yeah, agreed. And you asked earlier about what do we see as being effective practice in inside of account teams. So one is being able to get to the altitude and all the things that we've covered really excitedly today. Now I'm ready to go off and. But the second thing that we look for is, okay, so you got in and you got access, right, to a new set of executives, or even with executives you've done work with in the past, and you're looking to sort of expand sell. Well, let's take a half step back, because you talked about pipeline and in this whole pipeline stalling. Well, status quo, right? When we think about this, we always hear about status quo, right? Buyers always go back to status quo. Well, they go back to status quo because you haven't given them a reason to change. It's not about your widget jumps higher, runs faster, drives better return than the competitor's widget, because that requires, I have to do a lot of work there, right? I already have an incumbent, I sort of know them, et cetera. So where the decision science comes in, the thing that account teams have to resolve is being able to effectively tell and land a why change story. If you can't effectively convince executive leaders that there's a need for change, then whatever motions you're going to invest in around my widget and my product and my coupons or whatever I'm trying to drive, right, it falls short. And what we know, what all the data shows, is better than 2/3 of the time, buyers just going to go, look, I'm good, right? Even on a real great product pitch. So don't go at it at trying to win the bake off. Start with how do we confirm that the buyer recognizes that there's an actual need to change, right? So that's sort of the new business acquisition. With current accounts, right, with current buyers and current accounts, that status quo thing, we want to continually build deeper moats around it, right? So
Right.
our motions are built and designed. What we want to see in an account is, what are you doing to protect the turf, right? Not in my house, right? So are there intentional strategies that are being executed that restates value, shows ROI, continues to tie the work that we do back against those business metrics at the executive level that got us the win to begin with? And how are we sort of amplifying that and sort of marketing that inside of the client's organization, again, to continue to build a moat?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, I always try to call out the fact that when account teams and sales teams invest so much time in the wrong motions, right? So imagine you can easily spend $500,000 investing five people's time in a deal pursuit that takes a year and fails.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot. And so add that up across hundreds of pursuits that don't go anywhere. And that no decision problem is a real lost, I mean, that's talk about lost opportunity costs and real money out the door. And you can't get the time back.
And there's a whole set of we think about those leading indicators, right? There are leading indicators that can be built into metrics and measurement inside of account teams where we can see that come out, right? So if there's not this engagement at the
Yeah.
executive level, right, and we're looking at, okay, what are the last 5 meetings we've had with the account? Why are we at that altitude? What are the motions within an account? Are renewals the thing you do the week before the contracts up, right? Or is there a sort of 360-degree, 365 strategy for driving value within accounts, widening your access to executive leaders and continuing to share those insights so that when renewal time comes, it becomes sort of the no-brainer, which is, yeah, Dave and his team, I couldn't live without them, right? They help me
Right.
navigate every day. So yeah, there's getting down to what are the things that we're measuring throughout the cycle to ensure that our account teams are investing in high value, high impact activity, not just how many more opportunities did you open this month.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. What advice would you have for strategic account managers this year in terms of just, this mindset shift, thinking about the customer? From your point of view, what would just be, two or three things you tell people to think about?
So if I were a key account manager, strategic account manager, and we're watching this, I would go through pretty deep self-analysis, right? How well skilled am I in the customer's business, right? How articulate am I around what the account's real sort of corporate rocks are? What are the things that are giving their executive leadership team real pause around making investments, right? We talked about this chaos in the market. Do I have a grasp on that chaos? And do I have the ability of showing up with some perspective as to either the input of the chaos, managing the chaos, or even sort of avoiding the chaos, right? It is, can I get to and hold a conversation at a different altitude in my accounts? And if I can't, right, if I'm sort of looking in the mirror going, I don't do that today, or I don't know how to do that, raise your hand, because you have competitors, and especially if you're working for a Goliath, there are Davies that Batman and Robin are going to go work with
Yep.
that will position and outmaneuver you at getting into those executive buyers. And it has nothing to do with their product being better than yours, their product being priced less than yours, et cetera. So I think that the self-reflection moment is, am I really viewed as being valuable to their executive leadership team? And
It's a
if
great question.
I
Yeah.
can't answer that, or I'm unsure, that's probably the answer.
I got some work to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's That's a really great, insightful sort of recommendation because I think a lot of this is just relax, think about the customer, really understand and spend some time synthesizing, what their needs are and thinking about that gap. And if you think like that a little differently every day, good things do happen when you sort of operate that way. But I think also some of the conversation today is communicate some of those insights about your customer internally up the food chain. Share some of
Yeah.
these insights, organize them, and shape sort of the internal mindset too, because you can drive real change from inside.
And one of the quick resources you have as a strategic or key account manager that may be feeling a little unsettled after watching this is go talk to your chief operating officer, go talk to your chief financial officer, go talk to your CEO, get an understanding of the chaos that they're managing with, and see if they would take a meeting with you based upon your last meeting prep or your last call prep. Right, you can
That's a
get
great
you can
idea.
get coached internally with executives who will give you really candid feedback. I would say in probably inside of 10 minutes of whether you belong in that room or not, and and how you could change your approach to be more effective. So take advantage internally.
Terrific. Well, thanks again, Brian, for joining us
Dave, thank
today.
you, thank you, appreciate your
How
time.
would our just to let our audience know what's the best way to, if they want to reach out to you or learn more about your firm?
Thank you. So we are Lucrum Partners, lucrumpartners.co. I am Brian at lucrumpartners.co. Or we will be selling new bat signals. I think Dave and Brian will. So if you just look up at the sky and you turn on your
There
bat
you go.
signal, Dave and Brian will come and help. But thank you very much for the
Fantastic.
opportunity of connecting today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.